Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. A video that I assume is going to be one of the more emotional ones that I upload on this channel, because what we're going to be doing today is talking about a game. A particular game that actually just celebrated its 10-year anniversary. December 9th, 2018 marked the 10-year anniversary for one of my favorite games, a game that saved my love for this incredible genre that is Japanese RPGs. And that game is Persona 4. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It has been an entire decade since Persona 4 has hit the scene. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about how I got into the game and what this game means to me. Because there's a lot of love going around for the Persona franchise. As we saw recently, the character Joker from Persona 5 is making its way into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And, seeing such love go around for this franchise that I hold near and dear to my heart, seeing a game like Persona elevated to mainstream where so many people who weren't interested in this franchise before are now getting involved with it, and seeing it on stage on the mainstream Game Awards show was surreal, to say the least. And to have the anniversary of Persona 4 coincide with all that, it was just like a 1-2 knockout to my emotions, man. And I really do mean it, because Persona 4 is a game that, like I mentioned in the intro, really saved my love for this genre. So we might as well talk about how I got into Persona 4 and how I got into the funk of not really caring too much about Japanese RPGs. So as you guys know, growing up, I played a lot of video games. Not as much as most people who, gaming was their passion night and day. I was pretty conservative, to say the least, considering being a child of Habesha parents. We were only allowed to play video games on extended weekends and summer vacation. So there was no gaming in between that. The only times we got to take our consoles out, because yes, our parents did take them away after the breaks, was when we had time off. And you can imagine that being a gamer in the 90s and the early 2000s, there was a lot of stuff to play. And when you had such a limited window of opportunity to play those things, you had to be selective about the games you picked up. So one of the very first JRPGs that I actually completed, and I've talked about this before at length, was the first Kingdom Hearts. I know a lot of people out there are going to be like, really? The first RPG you completed was Kingdom Hearts? It wasn't something like Final Fantasy? It wasn't Chrono Trigger? And to answer that, no, it wasn't, you guys. I didn't play all of those games until later on in my gaming career, if you will, when I got older and I was able to gain access to some of those older systems and play those games. The game like Kingdom Hearts, that game coming out was very significant for me because it really opened up my eyes to this incredible genre that is Japanese RPGs. Now, I know a lot of people are going to look at that and say, Kingdom Hearts really isn't a JRPG in the traditional sense, and you guys are right. But the sheer fact that I was able to play that game, complete it from start to finish, and then see these characters who are in such franchises like Final Fantasy, and then going from Final Fantasy, getting involved in various other Square Enix franchises. My early teen years / early adulthood was just crazy for Japanese RPGs. I seriously loved the genre. It honestly became my favorite genre. However, once we started getting into the newer generation of consoles, this was the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, I just didn't have that same love for the genre. One of the bigger games that came out at the time was Final Fantasy 13, and I really thought that that was going to be the Final Fantasy 6, the Final Fantasy 7, the Final Fantasy 9 of the generation, because I just got done playing those games only a few years prior, going through games like Final Fantasy 6 and playing that as a 12, 13-year-old, and then jumping into all these other franchises. It's just like JRPG overload, because back in the day, you had to wait for some of these games to come out. When you were a kid who was 13 years old on summer vacation and you had all these games at your disposal, it was just insane. So we were just hungry for more. But as we saw with the really big disappointment that was Final Fantasy 13, we started to see Japanese developers stray away from their roots, their foundations on what made them great. And to be honest, being a gamer who loved the games being put out by Square Enix, who loved all of these franchises, to see them in the state that they were now was disappointing, because if they weren't, a complete bastardization, they were games that were put on platforms that people didn't want. They were games that were put onto cell phones that people weren't trying to mess with, because this was way before the days where people thought cell phone gaming was acceptable. And in some situations, they just didn't touch these franchises at all. They got no love whatsoever. I don't think people understand what I meant when I said the 7th generation was one of the worst for Japanese RPGs, because we went from getting consistent bangers and hits, from the Super Nintendo to the PlayStation 1, the PlayStation 2, all these incredible games that came out, and to go to the 7th generation and you can barely list all of the genre-defining JRPGs, it really does take a lot of that stuff out of you. Of course, we can list off some of the great games here and there, but let's be real about life, you guys. As a whole, the 7th generation was not good for Japanese RPGs. However, there was one particular game that had come out, and I didn't play it originally when it released. I played it a few years later. I played it, I think, 2 or 3 years after the fact. It was when I started getting into the funk. So I'd say this was around 2010-ish. That game was Persona 4. And this was a game that, I had heard people talk about. I heard people mention Persona. When Final Fantasy 13 was getting ready to come out, and a lot of people were looking at it like, oh, this looks kind of suspect, you guys. People said that they wished that Square Enix would take the route of Atlus. And at the time, I didn't even know what this company was all about. I was like, Atlus, what is this, right? So I started looking into Atlus, and I started seeing some of the games that they had put out. And there was this series called Persona. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll take a bite. I was bored during the summer of 2010, and I was like, all right, I'll head over to GameStop and I'll pick up one of these games. Now, unfortunately, at GameStop, they didn't have Persona 4 for whatever reason. The only game that they had there was Persona 3. So I said, cool, I'll pick up Persona 3. I started playing Persona 3, and for whatever reason, I guess I got distracted by another game. I never got around to finishing it at that time. So I let Persona 3 just sit there on the shelf, and then I started seeing more and more people talking about Persona 4. Some of my subscribers were like, hey man, I know you didn't like Final Fantasy 13. I know you said you're kind of off of the JRPG train, but I think you will really love Persona 4. I know it's not on the PS3. You got to track down a PS2 because, yeah, people were saying those things about the PS2 once the PS3 came out. But I think you'll really enjoy this game. And to be honest, I just kind of shrugged it off. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll get to it eventually, but I don't want to have to dig out my PS2 out of storage and then playing a game in standard definition. It wasn't really something I wanted to do, because when you get spoiled, I'll just say this, by the higher fidelity visuals of something like a Final Fantasy 13, going back to something like Persona 4, you're just like, wow, we just went back in time a whole 10 years, man. But I had to get away from that mindset because I'm not a graphic whore by any stretch of the imagination. But there were certain things about playing certain games that were coming out in the modern era, not older games. In my mind, there was a difference between going back and playing an older game and then playing a modern game and it not having up to par visuals, if you guys understand what I was saying. But I said, screw that noise. Let's play Persona 4. So I went into another GameStop. I tracked down the game. I actually had to go and call the stores to see if they had it. I went and I bought the game. I started playing it, and bro, if social media was ever as big as it was now, I would be talking about this game non-freaking stop, because I was playing this game and I felt right at home. I felt at home with my love for Japanese RPGs, but it was so weird. It was so weird because when it came to JRPGs, there were so many times where I had to really, I don't have to say there's some give and take with the genre, but it's notorious for all of its cliches. Like, we make fun of first-person shooters for their, generic white guy protagonists, but we also got to make fun of JRPGs for their cliches as well, and there was something different with Persona 4. It really didn't have a lot of those cliches, and I had just loved the art style of the game. I loved the aesthetics of the game. I loved the nature behind it, and I loved the characters more than anything else because they didn't come off as really those stereotypical tropes that you'd see in JRPGs. Of course, every franchise in existence is going to have some resemblance to tropes, if you will. But with Persona 4, it really didn't come off like that. It's like, yeah, when you had some of these tropes, they felt organic. And I think the reason why is because these characters were so well written and so just handled in such a way that they felt real and genuine. I was playing this game, and the more times that I, had saved my progress and turned it off, I really wanted to turn the game back on and see what was coming next in the story because I got so attached to these characters, a feeling that I had not had in a JRPG in so many years. the fact that these characters were so real and so genuine and so well written, I was just flabbergasted because I was playing games where people told me that, yeah, these characters are so real and they're so relatable. And then you look at them and they're just cardboard cutouts, and the only reason people care is because they're pretty. That's literally it. But with Persona 4, like, I felt as if I was a member of this group, this team of detectives. It was so freaking awesome. And I remember completing the game over the course of a few months because I really wanted to savor the experience. And I was just shocked and amazed that this game had been out at the market for so many years and nobody had talked about it. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, was my turning point as a gamer with JRPGs. I had realized that since the AAA companies were not going to come to me with all these great games, that era was over for the time being. It's coming back now, thankfully. I had to go and search out some of these great games, the games that people aren't talking about. And Persona was one of those franchises. I had to look onto some message boards from people to see what other great JRPGs were out. Because unless you were in the know about these games, a lot of these other companies and news outlets weren't going to talk about them. Social media was not a thing, and the days of going into the stores and buying a game based off of the box art, I know a lot of you guys have done that a couple times, they were over. But Persona 4 really changed my mindset and my viewpoint on how I should approach video games. It shouldn't just be about what's most popular and what's out right now. Not to say that I ever had that mindset, but we were really spoiled back in the day, back in the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s, because all of these JRPGs were just at the forefront. You knew if you were playing a game from Square Enix that it was going to be an absolute banger. You knew if you were playing a game from Capcom, it was going to be an absolute banger. And you knew, this is how dated I'm going to sound right now, if you were playing a game from Konami, it would be an absolute banger. But after that generation, things just weren't the same. And I was so happy that a game like Persona 4 came along and I was able to experience it and love it. And so we fast forward a couple years later and Persona 4 gets some much needed new love. It got a second wind because the game was re-released on the PlayStation Vita, and it feels so weird holding this device in my hands considering, I love the Nintendo Switch, but that device compared to this is so big. In fact, I would say that the Vita is a little bit more comfortable than the Switch considering the way it's set up. It's small enough to fit in your hands, but I'm just trying to see if this even has battery. No, I haven't even played this since Danganronpa 3, so that's been a long ass time. Let me see if the game is actually in the Vita. It should be, considering that was the last thing I played. And yep, it's still in here. Danganronpa V3. Can we get a Switch port, please, of the entire trilogy? I know y'all are re-releasing it for the second time on the PS4, so hit me up. I'll buy that shit day one. But yeah, Persona 4 Golden had come onto the scene on the PlayStation Vita, and that was so significant. It was so significant considering Persona 4 Golden literally saved the Vita. It was the only reason people were talking about the Vita, because as you guys know, the Vita is ahead of its time. I still believe that to this day. It's got a great library of games, but it didn't have a great library of bangers, must-own titles. Persona 4 was that title. It was the game that everybody was talking about. If you're going to get a Vita, what game should you pick up? You should pick up Persona 4 Golden. It is the best game on the platform, and it was right. Not only did they go back there and rework the game, they went back and they added new content, so it was giving people more incentive to play the game. And whether you were playing it for the first time or not, whether you were a new fan or a casual who just said, screw this, well, I don't know why a casual would own a PlayStation Vita considering it doesn't have any of the casual games. It was just a phenomenal experience. And the funny thing is, I bought a PlayStation Vita, a year and change after it came out, but I didn't buy Persona 4 Golden immediately. For whatever reason, I don't know why. I think in my mind, I was thinking to myself, I didn't want to ruin or sour my experience playing Persona 4. I thought that the experience couldn't get any better than my first time playing it, which at this point was 3 years after the fact. But I went and I bought the game, and I just instantly fell in love with it again, once more. And it was so freaking dope because one of my friends, my best friend, my day one, Tundex Jamal, had gotten into the franchise on the Vita, and this dude had beat the game before me. And he was just like, bro, I am so freaking attached to these characters, and I'm feeling some type of way at this ending. And the epilogue that they included in this game with the music and everything, it just added on to the fact, man, this game was freaking emotional like no tomorrow, and it was just a lot of fun. And I think the reason why it took me, a whole, what was it? It took me like a good year and change to beat it was because I didn't want to go back to that ending. I didn't want to have to experience this all over again because I would have to say goodbye to my friends. And I know that's going to sound corny and not really something that I would ever say on the channel, considering I know when to separate and distinguish what is reality and what is the virtual world. But Persona 4 just made me just think like these people were real and they mattered, and the stuff that they were going through, the subject matter with all these characters, everybody is damaged and everybody is broken. The stuff that you guys relate to and you love in games like Persona 5, that was it for me in Persona 4, and I'm sure for a lot of people it was like that in Persona 3, which I went back and played after I beat Persona 4, and I was just like, where the hell have these games been all my life, man? So that's why whenever somebody asks me, why don't I ever get pissed off that Atlus is milking this franchise? Why don't I ever get pissed off that they're porting Persona 4 onto every platform under the sun? It's because I genuinely love that game and I want people to experience it. Everybody has that one game that they don't mind showing up on every platform. For some people, it's Final Fantasy VII. For me, it's Persona 4 and Persona 4 Golden. And if they would ever re-release the game on the PS4 and on the Switch as Persona 4 Platinum, I would be there day one to support it because I love this game, what it means, what it stands for, and what it's done for me as a gamer. And to Atlus, I can only express my gratitude for believing in games like this. The games like this actually matter in an industry that has become so obsessed with graphical fidelity, that has become so obsessed with online components, that has gotten so obsessed with making as much money from a game as possible, as opposed to creating a lasting experience, a game that is going to be remembered for generations to come. I'm happy that we have these smaller publishers and these smaller developers who give a damn about gaming, because it matters. It matters a heck of a lot more than a lot of people are realizing. Because if we didn't have these teams out there doing God's work, as I like to say, we wouldn't see the comeback of these companies like Square Enix, like Capcom, all of these Japanese companies trying to get back into gamers' good graces. That came from all these single A and double A studios pumping out these quality games, showing that all this stuff matters. And I am just so ecstatic as a gamer that this is happening. This resurgence in Japanese game development makes me so freaking happy, because that's all I've ever wanted. I've wanted this genre and this medium to grow as we've gotten older as gamers. We've given JRPGs some flack in the past for really not keeping up with modern standards. Like, how long did it take for them to incorporate auto-saving and things like that, voice acting and the like. But we're seeing this now, and it's taken us a long time to get to it, but I'm so thankful that we are able to have these conversations 10 years later. And it's just so freaking cool, because I know people are going to be watching this video, whether it's 5 days from now, 5 weeks, 5 years, and they're going to pick up some of these games and they're going to be playing them, and that is going to be their Persona 4. They're going to be playing some of these games. Like Dragon Quest XI and Yakuza could be somebody's first Persona 4, and they'll be loving and talking about this game for years to come. And it's just another reason why I love this medium so much, being a gamer, because you get the best of everything. You get this interactive experience where you can have fun playing the games, but you also get these great characters and these great stories, and it's so emotional and gripping, and the presentation behind it is top notch and world class. And it shows that you don't need to have the best looking game in the world. You don't need to hire these Hollywood voice actors and spend $150 million on it. You just have to put in the tender love, care, and passion, and that will be the game that gamers hold in their hearts for years to come. And as is evident with future installments in this franchise, that franchise will end up taking our hearts once again. Ladies and gentlemen, that was my Persona 4 retrospective video, all done in one take, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people ask me why I don't do crazy jump cuts or crazy edits, and I feel like that stuff is cool and it's necessary, it has its place, but I like to speak to you guys more from an emotional level, because this shit matters to me more than anything. And if you guys feel the same way, comment down below with all of your experiences. If you watch this in one take, comment down below. Let me know what you guys are doing at this time. Whether you were coming home from work and you're just trying to unwind with a beer, whether you're eating this, at the dinner table, whether you're sitting on the toilet and fapping to this. I don't care, man. A lot of people say I shouldn't say that, but screw it, man. I love you guys. You are family to me. My name is NGS signing out. Like always, I will catch you guys later. Peace.